Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and let me add to the welcome to everybody here. This is all about you. So this next hour or so is really all about you. It's really intended to help you become more familiar with the marketing research, with the insights, business and industry, and also help you with the decision-making process in terms of career planning and relative to marketing research. And as was mentioned, there is the format we have today is, first of all, we're going to invite someone to come up for a keynote talk, and then we're going to invite 4 individuals to join us here for a panel, and we'll open it up for any questions you have there. Okay, so that's the format. Very informal. So first of all, in terms of the keynote, I'm very pleased to welcome Simon Chadwick here to be with us this afternoon. And I'm assuming most of you are new to marketing research, and so perhaps you don't recognize Simon's name, but I guarantee you, should you decide to get involved in the field of marketing research, in a year or two, my bet is you'll certainly recognize Simon's name, because I think he's probably one of the most recognized leaders and influential people, if not the most, in our field today on a global basis. So I think it's just fantastic that he's able to join us here and give you some insights. Simon is known just not for being a researcher, so someone who's working in the industry, but also as someone who's an expert advisor to the rest of us in the industry in terms of how to be successful. Companies pay a lot of money to have Simon come and talk to them and advise them in terms of what's happening in the industry, where the trends are going in the industry, and really what to do in their operation to be most successful. So that's why it's so fantastic he can join you here today, because those are the things that you want to be looking at as you go through this decision-making process. So Simon has been the CEO, the leader for some of the biggest brand names in the marketing research industry over the years globally. He is now the managing partner for a firm called Cambiar, which is the best known management consultancy firm to the research industry. And the one other thing I wanted to mention is, and this is a new one, is that Simon just accepted the role as the first chairman of an association that's called the Insights Association, which is unfolding as we speak here today, because it's a merger that's happening between Casro and MRA, which is the largest trade organization in this country in marketing research, and together with the largest professional research organization in this field. So that's a tremendous honor, and that's a big deal. So with that, I want to once again thank you for spending time with us this afternoon, and pass the floor over to you.
Thank you, Michael. And good afternoon, everybody. You're in the best place on campus today. Hi there. So, September the 18th, 2007, I got a phone call from my American-born daughter in London. And she said, "Dad, I just want you to know that I've just accepted a traineeship at a company called Research International," which was weird, because 30 years to the day before that, I started as a trainee at that very same company. So I've been in the business for nearly 40 years now, and I have to tell you, I'm still loving it. This is a business which you fall in love with, and it never lets you go. I started as a trainee, and in those days, they trained you for 2 years before they ever let you loose on a client. That wouldn't happen today. It's much too fast-paced today. And one of the things they used to do, this was the days before the internet, before phone research, it was pretty much all face-to-face. They used to send you out with some of the worst designed questionnaires in the world, just to show you how painful it was for both the interviewer and the respondent to be on the end of a badly designed questionnaire. One morning, I was sent out with a questionnaire on fire prevention, was about 9 o'clock in the morning. I got to a large house. The door opened. There was a young lady in a see-through chiffon negligee, and she'd obviously been at her parents' gin. I was obliged to accept the interview under the rules governing at that time. So we sat down in the sitting room, and the first question, there was no introduction to this questionnaire. That was the first mistake. No explanation of what I was doing there. The first question I had to ask her was, before you go to bed at night, what precautions do you take? So that was how we got trained in those days. 2 years later, I got my first managerial job in agricultural research. I'd only been on the farm once in my life. I then spent the next 3 years mucking out pigs, helping farmers give birth to calves, going around chicken processing plants, and believe you me, I didn't eat chicken for years after that. And all sorts of wonderful things, agricultural. Took up a post as chairman and CEO of our Italian company at age 29. Had to learn Italian straight off the bat. Been through a number of CEO positions, as Michael mentioned. And now, as he mentioned also, run a management consulting company. I've been called everything from a sage to an iconic visionary to a research whisperer, which all translates into old fart. So, this career has taken me to work and live in places as far-flung as Milan, Kenya, London, New York, Phoenix, and now Raleigh, North Carolina, slightly oddly. And it's really, people have a conception of market research, or consumer insights as it's called today, which I think in public is slightly vague. I don't know if any of you have actually talked to your parents or your loved ones about your potential career choice, have you? Yeah? Did their eyes glaze over? Of course they did. They have no idea what this profession is about. So, let's just try something. If you think about this industry, what words come to mind? What single word would you describe this industry with? Scientist? Problem solving? Data? Great. Any others? Curiosity? Great. Insights. Okay. Those are all great words to describe this industry. How about also passion? People who work in this industry are really passionate about learning about human beings and how they tick. How about logic? All those logic classes that you took and dreaded, they actually bear fruit in research. Intuition. Sure, it's a data-driven business, but you have to also use your intuition. You have to also be able to meld the two and to work out what the patterns mean and to work out when a small pattern is actually much more important than what seems to be a big pattern. You have to be able to predict what's going to happen. You have to have the confidence to be able to tell your client that what you're telling him or her is actually important. Curiosity you mentioned, strategy. Very often you're dealing with tactics, but very often you're actually informing strategy. One of the myths about research is that it's about truth seeking. And sure, you are seeking a form of truth, But ultimately what it's about is brand advocacy and advocacy for strategy. You are trying to make an impact. Your insights are not insights unless they lead to a change in action by management. An insight that does not lead to change or does not lead to action is merely nice to know. So when and if you're ever told that your job is only to provide information, do not believe that, do not accept that. Your job is to influence strategy and action. This is also a highly forensic industry. It's amazing, you know, you see all these shows on TV, forensic shows. This is a very forensic profession. You're digging all the time for clues, for information that lead you to a particular path. So that makes it really exciting. And I can get very excited when I'm, in with a client, when I was actually doing research. I remember once I was in with the marketing director of British Airways, and we were having a heated debate about how to maximize revenue out of Madrid. Which flights we should have out of Madrid based on research. And I was actually working off what used to be at the time, what do they call them, Michael? Those machines that you presented with overheads. And you had acetates on overheads. And I had a big red pen. And I was so excited about the data that was showing that I scrawled a big red circle around the data, and then realized that I'd just written on his wall. Next time I came there was a huge map standing on the wall. So for me, I think, it's an industry that there's been huge amounts of variety. I've studied pigs. I've studied cars. One of the proudest things I did was I pretty much designed the exterior design of the Land Rover Discovery, one of the iconic SUVs on the market, through research. And that's when I showed intuition as well, because the data showed that it should have a flat roof. And I knew that if it had a kinked roof, it would sell better. And I actually managed to convince them to do that, and that became its signature styling feature. I also had a lot of fun testing Land Rovers in the desert against other SUVs. Had a wonderful British client. He was about this tall. After a long day in the desert, we came into the resort. We were sitting there having a drink, and suddenly he started talking in tongues and going red, and his eyes started bulging. I thought he was having a heart attack. Turned around, it turned out that the hotel was hosting the porn industry Oscar night. And there were a whole series of young ladies, let's say déshabillées. I don't think he remembered that. Commercially, research is really important. It's about product. It's about things like designing cars or designing motorbikes or designing packaging or designing a new food or sensory research or understanding people's tastes. It's about communication. It's about the brand. What is the brand promise to a consumer? How is that brand promise kept? How is the brand experienced? When is it experienced? What does it mean when it's experienced? What's the customer experience? It's all about thinking about the customer, the product, the brand, interacting. And that's exciting enough. But it's also a huge tool socially. The US government spends $4 billion a year on research. And that's the research it doesn't do itself. $4 billion a year. Policy is made through research. The British and French governments have what they call nudge tanks, which are policy units that rely on behavioral economics and research to understand how to influence people in healthier directions in their lives. One of I think the most amazing studies ever undertaken won the SMR Best Paper Award last year. It was a collaboration between a number of research companies in Southern Africa. And their job was to work out how to persuade young men to get circumcised so as to reduce the incidence of AIDS. And 64% of young men in that particular region would say, yes, I'm going to do it, and 17% would actually go and do it. What was preventing them? Who could they talk with? How could you get through to them? How could you get them to actually follow through? And in an amazing study filled with ethnography, surveying, gaming, gamification, they managed to understand the channels of communication that would enable these young men to do this. And the result was that in those countries, in those 7 countries, the incidence of new cases of AIDS dropped by 60%. That's the power of really well done market research. That's its power. That's what you can do. It's an industry in which we're constantly innovating. It's an industry in which you're never going to grow bored. Whether we're innovating technologically, experimenting with the use of wearable technology, looking at biometrics and how biometrics actually can tell you the emotions that are being felt at a particular time, experimenting with neuroscience to show how the brain is actually reacting to various stimuli. It's an industry that draws on virtually every single academic strain in life. It draws on science, as somebody said earlier. It draws on maths and statistics. It draws on behavioral economics, one of the most exciting areas right now, following the work of Daniel Kahneman and Dan Ariely. How do you get to system 1 thinking? How do you understand system 1 decision making versus system 2? It draws on economics itself, the dismal science. It draws on psychology, draws on physiology. Whichever of these you may be coming from, or business, it draws on it all. And it melds it together. It synthesizes it. And you become the synthesist. And being a synthesist is a very cool thing, because that means you are using incredible amounts of your brain. It's also about power skills. Power skills are those skills which enable you to take the wonderful research that you're doing and to ensure that there's impact from them. So they are communication skills. To be a great researcher, you have to be a good communicator. It's about influencing skills. You have to understand how to influence other people and win them round in an argument. And believe you me, if you're working in a big corporation where there's lots of politics, and you've done a study, there's bound to be someone in that room for whom that study is very inconvenient. And you have to work out how to bring them round. You have to understand storytelling and be able to tell stories. And that's something that terrifies a lot of people. No, I'm not a storyteller. I'm a statistician. I'm a data scientist. Well, everybody's a storyteller in one way or another. It's about unlocking that skill, and that can be trained. And ultimately, it's about being a strategist. But perhaps that's a little later in the career. And finally, it is market research is a career pathway. A number of us actually stay in it forever because we love it, or we stay on the fringes or on the periphery. But there are a number of researchers who have made great strides in their lives and gone on to great things. Right here in Michigan, Mark Fields, the CEO of Ford, was once my client as a researcher. So, you can get to be CEO of an organization or a corporation. You can get to various different pinnacles of your career. So I could have come here and talked to you about all sorts of different aspects of being a researcher, but what I really want to communicate to you today is that if you choose this career, this is not a decision that you will regret. You will be entering into a career that Forbes has just rated number 1 in the country. Think about that. We've gone from being nerds in green eye shades to number 1. How cool is that? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, Simon. And we're not letting him off the hook yet, because as now our 4 panelists come up on stage, I would like to include Simon as well as available to you to answer any questions. So we're going to open up the floor after we introduce those 4 folks. But again, if there's some question you'd like to ask Simon as well, he's going to stick around here with us, and we'll put a mic on him as well. So, with that,
4 chairs for 6 people. Mike.
Yeah, you and I get to sit down here.
Sit down here.
Yeah.
There you go.
We want to thank very much our 4 panelists who are from, as you will find out, from a lot of different areas of the industry, bring a lot of different perspectives to us here today. And so rather than me go through and introduce each one of them, I'm going to ask them to. And specifically, the question always seems to come up in terms of how did you end up in this field of research? Simon kind of talked about that as well. So just to start things off, what we're going to ask everybody here is to just tell us who they are, where they're working, what their role is, but how is it that each of them ended up in the field of research? And then we'll open up the floor to any questions that you have. Merrill?
Thanks, Michael. So there I was, a freshman, sophomore at Hofstra University. How many people have gone to Hofstra University or know where it is? 2. Yeah, it was a small school, East Coast, based in New York, wasn't in the Big Ten. We were Division III football. So I was there. I was an accounting major for my freshman and sophomore year of college until I took my first accounting course. I wanted to be an accountant because my dad was an accountant. I realized that profession was going to be a little too exciting for me. I dropped the course very quickly. I did not tell my parents. I changed majors for about 6 or 7 months to try to figure out a story, and then I went into what was called back then BCIS, which was Business Computer Information Systems. Still didn't really know what I was going to do when I graduated. I finally did graduate, and my mom came home in June, and I was probably watching back in the day Gomer Pyle, Laverne and Shirley, which probably nobody in here other than Simon and Professor Spring and Michael know. Does anybody know who Gomer Pyle is? Wow. Oh, yeah, Laura, of course you do. She's our age too. It was the shows on back then when there was only 3 stations. So the reality is my mom came home and said, I just had the greatest experience in my life. I was paid to talk and eat, and I went to a focus group. And she said the greatest thing about that experience was that they are looking for interviewers. And she came home with this application. Back in the day, you would actually use a pencil and paper and fill out an application, and then you would drop it off, and then I got hired. So I did start as an interviewer. From then, in fact, not only interviewing, I did door-to-door interviewing in the United States back in the day for companies like Gillette and other CPG companies. From there, by accident, I started in sales, when sales back in the 80s was not really something that was in market research. stayed within sales, ran a number of focus group facilities, got involved in the .com, where I was going to retire after about 16 months and make millions of dollars. I'm still working. That didn't really work out. And then I was recruited about 3 or 4 times to lead some pretty significant organizations. And the last one, Market Research, which is a 52-year-old market research company. It's one of the oldest companies in the United States, where I'm president and CEO, and been in Texas for about 13 years now. So got into it by accident, absolutely love it. I love the word that Simon used, passion. The beauty about this industry is you can put a lot into it and you'll get a lot out of it. The market research industry worldwide is about $40 billion roughly. And the reality is that's about 1/10 the size of the largest company in the world, which I think at this point is Walmart. It's either Walmart or Exxon. They go back and forth. It's a fantastic profession. You can do well. You can make lifelong friends like the gentleman to my left. And it's really a special place. And I just want to back up a lot of the words that Simon said. It is an amazing profession, one that's been what I've called home for 32 years. For many years, I wanted to be, played left field for the Boston Red Sox. And if somebody had said, okay, you can have a redo, you can play left field for the Boston Red Sox for 5 years, after Jim Rice and Kyle Yastrzemski, my 2 heroes, or be in the market research industry for 32 plus years, I wouldn't change a thing. Be market research all day. So,
Steve?
One of the things I think that you'll notice when you talk to people who've been in the industry for quite some time is that most of us have gotten into the industry by accident. We didn't have career paths through colleges back then. It was, it was sort of an unknown industry. But mine, for me, I sort of was born into this industry. My mom started my company when I was 3 years old. She started it as a part-time job, actually, just to make some extra money to help put my oldest brother through college. But little by little, she built up a small business in our house, from the bedroom to the kitchen to the basement. And it's sort of one of those sort of cool American stories of how businesses can start and actually build. I grew up watching her survey people and go door to door, as Meryl said, to ask housewives about food products or interview executives at petrochemical companies about their businesses. I also got the pleasure of getting kicked out of my house every night, Monday through Thursday, when I was a kid, because my mother would run focus groups in our living room and the clients would sit in the kitchen. And that's the way things were done back then. I swore that I would never be in this business. Went to college, went to medical school at Georgetown for a year, decided to take a year off, and she basically looked at me and said, "You're not going to sit on your ass for this year while you're thinking about your life. You're going to work for me, make some dollars, and keep yourself off the street." And I fell in love with the business. 34 years later for me, I got to tell you that it's been a great journey. I have made some amazing friends. I would say that one of the things that's so impressive to me is how the industry has morphed. It's still a cottage industry, as Meryl said. It's not really big in size, but the way that we look at problems today and we solve them is very different. We have the convergence of not just survey data, but all kinds of data, all kinds of information, behavioral. And I really believe that we're sort of at the start of the journey. It's really going to get much more fascinating from this point forward, and it's going to move a lot faster. The other thing that I would just encourage each of you to think about, as Simon said, is that there really is an opportunity for research or insights to play a much bigger role in corporate America, and we're seeing that day in and day out now. We're getting a bigger seat at the table. We're more involved in the bigger decisions that are made, and I really believe that as information becomes more and more valuable, it will continue to be one of the sought-after careers for many people. So, and it's good to see everybody. It's great to see so many young faces. Oh, you got Jack.
Oh, I've got one. Hi, everyone. For those of you who stopped by the Wendy's table, you've already met me, but my name is Jackie Weber. I'm currently a manager of consumer insights at Wendy's. I did not fall into research by accident, but it just took me a little while to get here. So when I actually started college, I started as a nursing major. I really loved science all through high school, and you would probably call me a nerd if you knew me back then. But as I started taking some of these introductory biology classes at Michigan State, it just didn't really fit with me, and my mom had a conversation with me and said, Jackie, I don't see you being a nurse, figure out something else to do. So after that summer, I came back and did communication and sales. Following my sophomore year, I did an internship in Columbus, Ohio with Coca-Cola, where I was in sales, and we went around downtown every day, sold in our different products to the clients and fixed up their coolers. And I always found myself asking my sales rep, why are we showing 5 facings of Fanta in this store, but only 2 in this one? Why do we put Coke on the top shelf at this store, but maybe not on the top shelf in the other ones? And all he could say was, well, that's what corporate tells me, so that's what I'm going to do. So some of my inquisitive questions were just never answered. And I came back to campus in the fall, and I met with Dr. Sprang, and I felt like a train kind of hit me in a good way that I needed to change my career path completely to market research. So I pursued market research ever since. Through an internship opportunity at Gongus, I was able to look at supplier side opportunities. I did enter the master's program of market research, just like many of you are interested in today, which is a fantastic program, so keep on going. While I was in the program, I did an internship at Nationwide Insurance, also in Columbus, Ohio. If you can't tell, I really like Ohio. There's more to it than Cedar Point, I guarantee. And after the internship, just stayed on full time. It was really interesting. You might not guess this, but people aren't that excited to talk about insurance. When you bring them to a focus group and say, we're going to talk about home insurance today, it's like, yay. So I felt like there was something missing in my career, and Wendy's is also located in Columbus area. And I made that switch a little over 2 years ago. And it's so exciting to be in an industry where people are passionate, like super passionate about the products you're selling. I often tell people, oh, I work for Wendy's. Oh, the spicy chicken people. Oh, the frosty people. And it just brings a lot of energy to the job when you have great products to sell. So that's how I'm here.
Hi, thank you for having us. My name is Susan, and I work for a company called Precision Sample. I'm on the supplier side of what you would call the industry. And so many of us keep saying the industry because it is. It's very much a family. My company is based in Denver, Colorado, and much to my predecessors who've spoken before me, I also fell into this industry. About 16 years ago, I actually, post-mortem to my college career, I started out working for a congressman in Hawaii. It was very fun, and learned a ton of translatable skills, one of which ultimately landed me a job in this industry. Now, my first job in the market research industry was working for a company, and I remember it was during the dot-com boom. Everybody was going to .com so-and-so, .com so-and-so, and buying, massive cars with their stock options. I decided that I was going to actually take a job working for a traditional brick-and-mortar type of company. In that first job, I remember first 3 days thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to completely revamp myself after this because I didn't even know that this industry existed. What am I doing here? I was a marketing manager. More specifically, even more niche than that, I was managing panels. I was managing panels, and I was supposed to create these panels for the likes of, ESPN at the time, NBC Interactive, at a time where people were still justifying what online research was. And this is early 1999, 2000s, if you will. So I immersed myself in the first couple of years trying to learn as much as I can. I sat in these focus groups. I went to do the qualitative. I listened in on telephone interviewing, learned what caddy interviewing was, learned all of the methodologies that you possibly could to make my decision of whether, well, is this something that I'm going to have a career or is this something I'm going to have a job in? Ultimately, 16 years later, 6 acquisitions, 1 IPO, or merger and acquisition, 1 IPO later, I'm still here. Now, I'm obviously here because I'm still having fun. I get to spend a ton of time with people that are very, very, very passionate about what they do. Not only that, we get to see these trends in these industry before it happens, before it emerges. One of the examples I'll give you guys is my husband also, actually, I met my husband in the industry, and he's working for a video game company right now. And he's been able to translate that and utilize some of those skill sets to be able to identify what's happening and be able to pull from market research, be able to pull from data, be able to pull from all of the things that we've learned and apply it towards, you know, his job. He's now heading up the esports strategy for a gaming company. And that's an emerging field. And I feel like when I first entered the industry, it was kind of the same thing for online and online panels. But I'm still having fun, learning a lot still, and meeting really interesting people.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Thank you. So, a very wide range of reasons how and why people got involved in the industry, and a wide range of experience in the industry. But the common thing is they're all here for you here today to answer any questions that you may have. So at this point, we'll open it up. And does anybody want to start us off with any questions for somebody or anybody on the panel? We had some questions come in ahead of time, so let me start priming it here. In terms of, one of the biggest questions came in ahead of time from the class was, how would a career path look? What would it look like at your company? So, Susan, you were talking, why don't you just keep going and start us off there in terms of what a career path would look like?
I think ultimately it depends on, in any organization, you have to decide where do you want to be. And in order to be able to answer that question, I think it ultimately depends on whether you want to be on the sales side, do you want to be on the operation side, do you want to be on the execution side? It comes down to more than just being a market researcher. When you're looking at your career, it ultimately depends on what side of the fence do you want to sit on. So for us, someone who wants to go into sales, you might start out as an account executive. You might start out as a bidder. And what I mean by bidder is someone who is working on a proposal. And on the supplier end of the business, things happen a lot faster. It doesn't take 6 months to develop a proposal. We will get probably anywhere from, in a course of a day, we can get anywhere from on a slow day, 1,500 proposals to 10,000. So in an operational role, that's really what you're working, in a sales role, that's really what you're kind of working towards. In an operational role, if you're working on as a project manager, you're going to have to work your way up. There are some operational skills that you're going to have to acquire before you can become a project manager. You're going to have to learn a little bit about the industry, and there's a ton of lingo. So.
Yeah, I would just add that, and Simon alluded to this before, which is that, you tend to not touch clients right away in terms of your interactions, but you would tend to interact with them a lot faster than you used to. So, you're typically looking at more of a project management type of role or a support role, but then very quickly moving on to being responsible for work. And that could be on the execution side or it could be on the account side. We've seen people in our organization, really grow quickly, probably within a 4 to 5 year period. And actually, it sort of, it always shocks me a bit because I always think of the the process being much slower, but it really isn't. We've got key players now in our organization that are in their, the 27 to 30-year range, and I would say that in many ways, because of their skill sets and sort of how the world is moving today, in some regards, they're passing by the folks who might even be more experienced just because of those skills.
So Jackie, then, so Susan and Steve answered that from a supplier, provider perspective. Do you think on the client side, from what you've seen so far, it's different?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. So on the client side, it's a lot more, I would say, project managing than actually executing the research. So for those of you who might not know the difference between client side and supplier side, client side are corporations that you might think of, like Wendy's or Coca-Cola. And because we have smaller research teams, say, well, at Wendy's we have 6 people on our research team, we don't have all of our time to program the surveys, have all of the meetings with the internal stakeholders to make sure we know what we want to learn about, gather all of the sample, doing all of that. So we would partner with a company like Mark and engage them in the research process. At Wendy's, the starting role would be an associate manager of consumer insights, and we've pretty much had people with at least 2 years of experience or a master's in market research start at that level. So you will be running your own projects, but they'll probably be a little bit lower profile than if you were a manager or a director. But you still get the same experience working cross-functionally all around the business. Once you have a few years of experience, you would be promoted to manager, where you are expected to lead your own projects, expected to make sure all your stakeholders are aligned, and you get a little bit more high visibility projects. From there, if you still wanted to stay in consumer insights, it would be a director role, and at that point, you would manage the whole marketing research team. But you'd also be the personal consumer insights person for the senior executive team. So our boss, Dale, often goes to biweekly meetings with our CEO to update him on what is going on in the industry, what kind of projects we're doing, and what sorts of things you're going to learn. One thing that is really nice about Wendy's is we're not just a market research company. If you find out through interacting with the brand management team that you're interested in trying that kind of opportunity, we have brand managers and we have brand manager roles, so you could transition there for a few years if you want to learn more. Same thing with supply chain, same thing with finance. And I know there is somewhat of a misconception that if you don't work on the supplier side, you're not going to have variety in your job. And I had that same feeling, because when I worked in my supplier side internship, I worked for Hallmark, Coca-Cola, Mars, Domino's, all of these people at the same time. But I thought, if I go to Wendy's, I'll only be working on Wendy's things. That's kind of boring. That's so far from the truth. Just for an example, last week I was working on restaurant design research. This week I presented franchisee satisfaction results to our CEO. And next week, I'm working a lot on developing our chicken products. So each one of those has a different set of teams that I work with internally, and it just provides a lot of that fun variety under the Wendy's umbrella.
That's great. Thank you. Any questions on the floor so far? Quiet group. If not, I'm going to keep going. Yes. I'll give you the mic here. Tell everybody your name.
Hi, I'm Travis Lang. I'm a senior here, and I was wondering, this is kind of at Steve, you talked about some recent marketing grads working their way up very quickly due to new skills, which allowed them to pass by some of the more experienced people. What are some of these skills?
I think a lot of it is around social. The ability to really utilize, social media in terms of, in my case, it's data collection. So finding respondents, engaging with respondents, eliciting opinions and information in a different format. And I think for me, because the work that we're doing now is becoming more and more complicated due to the people like Jackie, whose work is becoming more specific, we really need the access to people. That's sort of almost how we've repositioned our business, which is, we look at ourselves as providing access to participants, respondents, opinions. So we've got people who are doing a lot more work utilizing the various social media channels, the idea of thinking differently from a strategic standpoint, learning faster. I think your generation is a generation of folks that just have to learn quickly because of what you're faced with. And my generation, I think we're always playing catch up. So when we look at evolving our business and how it may change, we want to stay on the front side of that, not the back side of it. So we're trying to think the same way and in turn hire the same types of people.
Michael, let me just
Yeah.
add something. For our organization, social is definitely important. And in terms of really moving up in our enterprise, you got to understand marketing now. You got to be able to, market research industry has dramatically changed from back in the day we were dealing with market research analysts, director of marketing research. Now we're dealing with brands, we're dealing with CMOs. And that's a different way to communicate. That's a different skill set. So for us, understanding marketing, understanding social is critical. And really, if you really want to be fast-tracked in our enterprise, and I'll give you the secret for most CEOs, there's 3 things catching the eye of a CEO. Number 1, sales, right? Number 2, building a product that people can sell. And the third thing is, well, let me ask you a question. Who's going to carve a pumpkin next month? Anybody? Okay. Laura, you're going to carve a pumpkin? Okay. Of course you are. How do you do it? How do you carve your pumpkin? Just quickly. You go to the store, you get a pumpkin, and then what do you do?
Get all the kids in the kitchen, we form an assembly line, somebody does the eyes, somebody does the nose, somebody does the mouth, boom, go.
Okay, you do it. Do you cut something first? Do you cut out?
Yeah, cut out the tops,
Okay.
the stuff out.
Okay.
Everybody has their own features that they do, probably do 5 or 6 at one time, and then
That's great. That's great. And most people, I would agree, do it the same way as Laura and her family in Ohio, right? Okay. So what if I told you here today there's a little bit of a better way to do that? Instead of cutting off the top, cut off the bottom. Okay? So why would you cut off the bottom? Well, gravity. Because, I don't know, raise your hand if you're like me, to grab out the guck. It's slimy, it's gross, it's just not nice, right? It's just, yeah. So you cut out the bottom. Gravity, what happens? All the guts, most of it, 80% of it will come to the bottom. Get it out of there. How many people, Laura, have you ever lit a candle? Have you scorched your arm and some of your hairs are missing now because of that? If you carve out the bottom and now the guts is there, you put the candle in, you put the top on, you're not going to burn anything. And the third thing is it's easy to carry. If you carry it from the top, God wanted us to carry it by the stem. So the reality is the third thing that catches your eye of a CEO, and the secret is increasing an efficiency. And if you think about it, Lara's parents taught her, Lara's grandparents taught her parents, her great-grandparents, her great-great-great-grandparents, and she's been doing this rhyme for 200 years. So the reality is if you can come up and pay attention, and with the technology in today's society, the young people having a huge advantage over us old guys like Steve and myself, and increasing efficiencies is something that you guys can do and catch the eye of a senior person. So
It all comes down to pumpkins.
it comes down to pumpkins.
Yeah.
Always. It's always pumpkins.
As a side note, explain to us, you're answering from a full-service research organization.
Yeah, I'm
Steve's
sorry.
answering
So-
from a data collection. Just explain to people the
so
difference.
we probably should have done this at the beginning. So here's what happens, okay? Jackie has a chicken project. She has a segmentation study. Congratulations. And it's $4 million. She has made a smart decision, and she has awarded Mark Research that project. In essence, it's a qual and quant project. We utilize Steve Schlesinger Associate, the largest qualitative facility operation company in the world, north of $110 million, to do some upfront qualitative research. We would then use Susan's company. We're going to allow her to come into the mix. We need some sample for the $4 million study that we're doing for Jackie. So we purchase the sample, use her platform. We will then use that. We'll come up with some presentations, some insights. Jackie We make some recommendations to Jackie. We pay all of our partners. Jackie awards us a $9 million project next year. That's kind of now. We then would also allow Simon to come into the mix, who's a consultant in this, because one of us, probably us, we want to sell our company or we're struggling with some type of system, where Simon has Cambiar, who has a tremendous amount of consultants that probably all have north of 30 years of experience, who can really help us sift through and navigate through some of this stuff. So that's kind of how
Fantastic. Okay, so all the pieces of the puzzle come together.
Marketing
That's great.
research food chain.
Right,
Yeah.
in essence, yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions from the floor? Okay, well, while we're waiting for those, here's another one that came up from the class was, so everybody here, or most people here, are in an interviewing process. Some are interviewing here at the tables this evening. So in your company, what does the typical application and interviewing process look like that one of the folks here would be exposed to? Why don't we start again with Susan?
For us, I feel like with technology being so easy, it is so easy to go on Monster.com, LinkedIn, and all these social media sites and all these apps that are available with a click of a button and send your resumes out. In fact, this morning I was talking to my head of operations, and she said, hey, while I'm on the phone, I've gotten 10 applications. The problem is we are not finding applicants that are qualified for the job. And I think Laura, who's sitting in the audience, who's a recruiter, would agree with me. We would utilize a firm like Laura, particularly because it helps us weed out 100 applications before we find the two that is applicable. So in terms of the application process, I would say what I would encourage you guys to do, obviously you're all sitting here because you're interested in getting into market research. What I would say to you guys, and my advice to you guys is, look, you have to make sure that the 20 seconds that, whether it's a recruiter or myself, gives to your application, that your application stands out. Not only that, is it applicable to what you're applying to? Does it have a great cover letter? And then post-mortem to submitting the application, if I'm asking you questions about, hey, what's your salary requirement? When are you, what areas of the company would you be interested? Despite the fact that this job might be in, say, operations or say in sales, that you're going to follow up. You guys would be surprised at how many people do not follow up. So we had sent this out, and I would say like a week ago we had this, and we had a position open, sent out 40 emails. 4 came back out of 40. So it's not just about the application process. It's are you doing enough? Whether it's on social, have you cleaned up your social media? Have you do you have a clean resume? Do you have a great cover letter that tells me who you are before I actually get on the phone with you and give you 20 minutes of my time? I'm not sure if that's...
Great. Let's build on that then. Interviewing, application and interviewing process.
Yeah, so it happens a lot of different ways. So let me tell a story that happened 90 minutes ago in this room. When Susan, Steve, and I walked into the room, because I'm a 3-year-old, taking a picture inside that, is it called Spartan Stadium?
Yeah.
Spartan Stadium was something that I wanted them to experience. So being here before, there's a back door, and then there's a door that pretends to be locked inside the stadium that the lock is not, so you can jam it through. And then you can go into the stadium and pray you don't get arrested and take some pictures, which is what we did 90 minutes ago. The problem is the door shuts behind you, so we need somebody to prop it up for us. Well, is Jacob in here by any chance? I don't see him. So 90 minutes ago, we met a gentleman named Jacob, who's a sophomore. He was there trying to get a break, and he was right outside the restrooms. And he basically, we said, Jacob, can you do us a favor? He said, sure. And could you just hold the door for us? As we went into the stadium and took pictures for about 5 or 6 minutes. And he, thankfully, was a nice guy, as all Spartans are, and didn't shut the door, because if not, we would be stuck inside that beautiful stadium of yours. But the reality is, right afterwards, all 3 of us gave us, gave him our business cards. Three senior people in this great industry, and it happens in the weirdest places. Yesterday, I got an email from somebody on my staff who there's 2 open positions. My company is owned by Omnicom, which is the 210th largest company in the world. We own advertising agencies, BBDO, TBWA, a number of other ones. Well, we got an email through one of our contacts. There was 2 openings at GMR and BBDO. Through a friend of a friend of a friend, was able to send that over, and they've already got 1 interview out of 2 in less than 24 hours. Network, expect the unexpected. You know, be in a situation where, and I've made all the rookie mistakes where I've been in elevators and talked to strangers, and I was interviewing them for a position the next day, or that was my client. I've done foolish things like hit a double in softball, and we'll talk to the second baseman and say, wow, that girl over there is really, really attractive. It was a sister. So don't make all those dumb mistakes that we have. Expect the unexpected. Use LinkedIn. You're looking at somebody who has, next week I'll have 20,000 contacts on LinkedIn. Why? Because it's access. It's access to information. It's access to people. It's access to companies, and that's important. And I think you guys who are graduating soon understand technology a lot better than we ever did and can move this stuff forward a lot quicker than we can. And anybody you're interviewing with, go on LinkedIn, Google their name, and you will find out a tremendous amount about them. And there's no question that as a hiring manager, nobody gets hired in my enterprise without talking to me, even if it's for 5 minutes. The fact is, if they know something about me, if they level set, if they show a personality, you're going to get hired a lot quicker than somebody else.
Okay, Jackie, pick on you first in terms of being the client at the table. Would you say anything's different on the process there in terms of application and interviewing?
Yeah, so about like the specific steps you would go through to apply for Wendy's. Since we're here for market research master's students, we usually do our interviews in January at that big career fair. And very quickly after that's over, we have offered out to at least 1 individual for a summer internship. But if you were looking at Wendy's for a more full-time position, it's a little bit lengthier of a process. There's the formal application online. Then if you're local, they would do an in-person interview for 2 hours or something over the web. And if you make it past that gate, then you come in for a full day of interviewing with people from across the business. And trust me, your vocal cords get very, very tired by the end of the day. But I would say things or tips to keep in mind while interviewing around, it's really important the first impression that you make. Very, very important. It's probably not best to lead with, I'm not interested in your company, or I don't like your food. I guess that would turn me off. But there's so many things that go into a first appearance. I mean, it's your resume. Is all of the grammar right? Is it organized in a nice way? Are there things that are misspelled? Since research is such a meticulous kind of industry, if you're not spelling your words right, I don't think you pay attention to detail. So that might be a knock against you. The way that you're dressed, be professional. And I am so pleased to see so many of you dressed so professionally today. I will admit, and I don't think I've ever told this story before, but when I was a freshman here at State, one of my friends came to me after class and said, my dad said there's a career fair today. Do you want to go with me? And this was when I was still in nursing. And I said, sure. So she and I showed up in our jeans and t-shirts to a career event. We were out of there in 5 minutes. I have never felt so uncomfortable in my life. Luckily, everything worked out, and I learned how to dress the very next year. But just your overall appearance and just the way that you communicate with yourself. We talked to some great students today, and to be able to explain your resume and really tell the story of how you got to where you are is really impactful and makes you very memorable.
I just want to add a couple quick things. You know, what Jackie said about dress and appear professional, you got to know your audience too. So, you know, although you may be in a suit and tie today, you know, if you're going to Google, you're going to dress a little bit differently. If you're going to an ad agency, you might dress a little bit differently. So know your audience well. You know, be inquisitive. You know, ask real questions of the people that are interviewing you, because they're going to ask you questions as well. But if you don't show interest, in terms of what they do and what their business is about, it's probably going to fall flat on them. The other thing, too, is that for myself, and I think it's the case with many others today, a lot of what we're hiring on is chemistry. It's not just your resume. So your resume is going to count for something, but there's going to probably be 50 other applicants that have just as good a resume as you do, if not a better one. We're looking for, people that we can engage with, people who are going to fit well with our team. And frankly, you should be doing the same thing, because you can look at a job and it could be just the most intriguing job in the world to you, but if it's not the group that you want to work with, don't go there. Find the place that you want to work. Last point is, if you want to also learn more about this business, I think these career fairs are amazing because you get a chance in one afternoon to potentially see 20 or 30 companies. But I would also encourage you to invest a little bit of money, and if you're serious about marketing research, go to a conference. Get a chance to meet some people who are there. Listen to the speakers. I think you'll learn a lot, and frankly, you'll probably network there an incredible amount. You'll be unique because there's very few students who do show up, and ultimately I think you'll get a real feel for what this industry is all about.
Great, thanks, Steve. Well, we're bumped up against the time we have for the structured part of this here this afternoon. So, first of all, thank you, Simon. Thank you to our 4 panelists very much. And thank you for all joining as well. We are here to answer any questions and to help you out through the process. So we're going to stick around, and we'll answer informally and any questions you might have if you want to stick around as well. So once again, it's great seeing you all, and have a great semester.
I know. I wonder if it's a picture of Spark Steve.
In here? It's a little picture.
It says,
I'm hoping it's a pen.
Awesome.
Walter has no fear of time.
That's hilarious.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. I thought that was you earlier. I'm like, you don't expect to I didn't expect to see you.